So anyway, that was great, and we're now going to be rejoined by JD with Tory Bruno,
Okay, perfect.
CEO of United Launch Alliance, which is Boeing and Lockheed's
Hmm.
partnership.
Hmm.
They are putting things in space 24/7.
As we speak, huh?
Yep, absolutely. So love for you guys to enjoy this conversation.
Hi, welcome to another segment of America's Futures series. I'm here with Tory Bruno, who is the current president, chief executive officer of United Launch Alliance, otherwise known as ULA. In his role, Bruno serves as the principal strategic leader of the organization and oversees all business management operations. Prior to ULA, he served as the vice president and general manager of Lockheed Martin Strategic and Missile Defense Systems. So welcome, Tory. Great to have you as a part of this event.
Thanks, JD. Happy to be here.
So how does one become a rocket scientist, Tory? I mean, that's what an incredible career you've had over the many years you've been involved in the industry, now working with NASA and most recently launching on Saturday, this past Saturday on the 13th, which is exciting. I'd love to hear about more of that. Asteroid hunting and things like that around Saturn. I mean, it's extraordinary. So how does one decide to become a rocket scientist?
Oh my gosh. Well, I am just old enough to have seen the first moon landing and to have watched it live on a, black and white scratchy TV sitting, cross-legged in front of it. And from that moment, I was hooked on space. I think I was 8 years old. A year later, I was building my own rockets with 80-year-old dynamite I found in the back of my grandmother's barn that I kind of cut open and crammed into pieces of wrought iron pipe I also found. I think today the ATF would have something to say about this, but back then, and I'm proud to say that a handful of those rockets actually rose up into the sky before they detonated. And I survived that experience. And once I was old enough, I went away to college and got a degree in engineering. And then I went to work for Lockheed on rockets just right away. Always wanted to do rockets. And it is just an amazing career you can have in this industry. I've worked on probably 36 different systems. I've launched right around 400 rockets now over my career. I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. I have slept on a torpedo on a nuclear submarine underneath the water. I have shot a bullet out of the sky with a bullet. I have killed a rocket with a giant flying ray gun built into a 747. And I have sent a helicopter to Mars. I mean, there's no career like the career you can have in space.
Wow, that's exciting. For those of you who are listening in here, and if you have any aspirations, that's inspiring to follow in Tory's footsteps. What an exciting career. Do you mind holding up your two hands just to make sure they're both there? With all of that, they're all there. And you, so you survived the pipe bombs that you created. I got it. Outstanding. So what's that behind us? The buildings behind us. Where are you located at the moment?
We're in Centennial, Colorado, just a little bit on the south end of Denver. That's where our main headquarters is and where the design center is. It's where we have all the rocket scientists. And then, of course, we have our main factory in Decatur, Alabama, where we build these giant rockets, and a smaller factory in Texas for some of the parts, and 2 launch sites, one on each coast, because where you're going in space tells you where you want to leave from here on Earth.
Oh, interesting. How does, do you mind briefly talking about how that works? That's interesting.
Yeah, certainly. So when you want to go, say, to an orbit like one we would call geosynchronous orbit, which is an orbit that's so far out, it takes 24 hours to orbit the Earth. And so it looks like the satellite is hovering in the sky, which is great for things like dish TV. If your dish TV satellite wasn't there, your signal would come and go like every 15 minutes, say, if you were in low Earth orbit. But that puts the spacecraft right on the equator, what we call the ecliptic, which is the projection of the Earth's equator out into space. And so you want to launch as far south or as close to the equator as you can, because bringing that latitude down takes a tremendous amount of energy from the rocket and therefore limits the size of the spacecraft. The other thing is when you launch a rocket, which is a 20-story high, 2 million pounds of explosive propellant, we usually like to fly right away from people out over the ocean.
Right, I suspect so.
So Florida is a great location. It's pretty far south. We can fly right out over the ocean when we go due east, which is great because you get an extra 900 miles per hour for free, because that's how fast Cape Canaveral is moving along the surface of the Earth as it rotates. But if you want to be in a polar orbit, so, orbiting the pole, which is a great orbit for things like Earth observation. Just about a month or so ago, we launched the Landsat 9 satellite for NASA, which does climate and ecology monitoring on the surface of the Earth. If you orbit that way in a polar orbit, then the Earth spins underneath you and you get to cover the entire planet every day, multiple times a day, if you will. In which case, again, we want to fly over the water to get away from people, and we want to fly directly south. So we're in that polar orbit already. And the California coast from Vandenberg, or Central Coast, near where I went to school at Cal Poly, bends away as you move south. It bends away to the east, so we can fly almost due south. So it's the ideal place to launch from.
Well, how interesting. I had no idea that the reasons why. I thought it was maybe because the weather was poor on one side and maybe better on the other side, or the timing or something like that. To know that there's so much complexity behind that is really eye-opening. Now, so recently we touched on it when we first started the conversation. You were part in Parcel working with NASA recently. You launched something on Saturday, the 13th. Can you tell us a little bit about that entire endeavor? As I understand it, it's a fact-finding mission heading to the outer space towards one of our planets, Saturn, as I understand it.
Jupiter.
And, I'm sorry, Jupiter. Yep, Jupiter, and looking for asteroids of all things.
Yeah, this is a really cool mission. Partly because it's going to do just groundbreaking science. We're going to fly out to what are called the Trojan asteroids in Jupiter's orbit. So when we go out to a big planet like Jupiter and we look in front of it, there's something we call a Lagrange point. In fact, in front of it is the Lagrange point 4. And behind it, 60 degrees behind it, is the other Lagrange point 5. And these are kind of like eddies. They're kind of like, in a way, like vortices in a river that collects things, like a gyre, right, in the ocean. So a big planet like Jupiter, wherever it went, it collected material in these two places, in these two gyres, if you will, or Lagrange points. And Jupiter used to be closer to the sun very early, like billions of years ago. And it moved out and stabilized in the orbit it's in now. But that means that it collected primordial material left over from the very beginning and formation of our solar system. And this material has never really been studied before, because these objects, and there's about 1 million of them, these asteroids, they're very, very dark. They're almost black. If you looked at them, you would think you were looking at asphalt. And it's so far away that even when Hubble stares at one of these objects, it's just a point of light. You just can't really learn much by looking at light. You have to go there. And that's what this mission will do. And it's going to teach us about how the solar system was formed. And it is such an ambitious mission. It's going to be 12 years long. It will encounter 8 different asteroids, and it will travel 4 billion miles in that first loop. The trajectory alone, flying off from Earth where we send it, 2 Earth gravity assists to slingshot it out to these asteroids, what we call the Greek camp of Trojan asteroids. It's in front of Jupiter. It's going to drift through several bodies, 4 bodies. And then it's going to swing back around, slingshot again behind Jupiter, and catch 2 more. It's a really ambitious mission, more ambitious than Voyager in some ways. And so pretty exciting to be a part of all that. And of course, we used our mighty Atlas rocket, which is just, the great platform for this, because you don't want to miss an interplanetary window. The planets literally have to align to do something like this. And of course, it's the most on-time rocket in the world. And we deliver the most precise insertion orbits also in the world. We're the most accurate rocket. And when we do that, it saves the spacecraft propellant because it uses a little bit of propellant every time it's adjusting its orbit for these slingshot effects. And the more it gets to keep, maybe it can do 2 or 3 or more cycles and gather even more science. And then, of course, we have very sophisticated launch algorithms that let us have not what would normally be an instantaneous launch window, literally 1 second long. Instead, it could have been 75 minutes in case there's a thunderstorm, wayward boat, stray ice ball on the side of the rocket, whatever. Of course, we didn't need any of that. It went at the first second of the window, but it's a really cool mission, and I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Now, you had mentioned earlier about the different launch points. Does it matter in this particular case on Project Lucy where you launched the rocket in this case?
It does, because we wanted that extra 900 miles per hour.
Got it.
You could only get that by flying due east, and if you tried to do that from the California coast, you're coming right into the right over people right away, which it's a safe rocket. It has a perfect record, but still.
100%. I was going to say 100%. You've launched hundreds and hundreds of launches, and you've 100%, which is extraordinary. I mean, it's a perfect record. That by itself is just unbelievable. It's remarkable, and that's a testament to the team and the engineering and all of the planning involved and testing. I suspect you've done a lot of testing. I suspect your destructive testing is pretty fun.
We're kind of test happy around here. We have great engineering tools and we do a lot of modeling and analysis, but at the end of the day, we love a good test.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to be respectful for some of the people here. I've got questions that I want to refer to here. Give me 1 second, and I just want to refer to the questions. Okay. Question number 1. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So ULA's been pretty busy lately. Tell us about your most recent developments. Obviously you mentioned about Lucy, but more so on the company, its growth, and what's right around the corner. Just a little update.
Yeah. Oh gosh, what a great question. We're super excited because we're developing a new space launch vehicle right now, and we're coming into what we call the end game, sort of the last few months before that first flight. So in the middle of next year, we're going to fly a brand new rocket called Vulcan. We talked about that a minute ago when we were looking at the models, and it is a really much larger and more capable rocket with a lot more flexibility, things that it can do, like take many spacecraft up in one launch, for example, and a much also more affordable and lower priced rocket, as well as having more performance. And you get to develop a new space launch vehicle not that often, like every couple of decades is literally when these come around and get refreshed. So it's a big deal to do one. And we're right now in that end game. We've qualified, the solid rocket motors that are strapped on, and, we're building all the hardware. The first flight hardware is in our factory. We've got, 5 boosters now in flow in that factory, and we've got fancy upper stage. Oh my God, the upper stage on Vulcan is a game changer. It has got so much more energy and so much more endurance. It's going to allow us to do really interesting things later in cislunar space when that economy starts happening between here and the moon. So we're just, we're kind of working super hard. That's the hardest part of the development program, is kind of that last 6, 8, 9 months before you hit that first flight. It's kind of crunch time, but it's also the most rewarding work there is.
Wow, that's exciting. I mean, it's one thing to have done, what you guys have done in the past, but then to excel on top of that, to launch, using a pun, to launch on top of that platform into something completely new. I just heard you say something about the lunar economy. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, over the last about decade or so, there's been some really important discoveries kind of close to home. A minute ago, you and I were talking about Jupiter, right. But here in our neighborhood, we found a couple of really interesting things. The first is that these, we call them near Earth objects. They're asteroids that lie just beyond the moon. So they're kind of within easy reach of the moon. They're really within easy reach of Earth, in fact. We've known they were there forever, but what we've discovered more recently is that they are incredibly rich in minerals and materials that are pretty rare here on Earth, but they're really, we now understand, only rare here on Earth because of the way our planet formed that caused those materials to largely move into the mantle or below the crust. And then we wait on, geologic processes like volcanoes and subduction and things like that to bring them up to where we live on the surface of the Earth so we can get to them. But on these small objects that didn't go through that formation, they're just laying there. They're laying on the surface where some of these asteroids are almost entirely that. So we now understand that there's more than 1,000 years worth of Earth's entire annual production of industrial metals in these asteroids. Wow. In fact, one of them is basically a giant, hunk of platinum bigger than my office. So there's literally gold in those hills. In fact, there's more precious metals in these near-Earth objects than have ever been extracted in the entirety of human history. They're just right there. So that's one really interesting discovery. The other is that water is kind of everywhere out in space on planetary bodies. And in fact, we now believe that there is more than 20 billion metric tons of ice on the moon. And the reason that's important is two reasons. One, obviously, when people are out in space, we use a lot of water. But even more importantly, for the economics of how all of this could turn into wealth and abundance for people here on Earth, is that water is very easily converted into rocket fuel. In fact, it's converted into liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, which are the most energetic, highest performing chemical rocket propellants we use today. So it's not just propellant, it's the best premium propellant you could ever hope for, and it's already in space. That makes it practical to use that in situ resource, convert it to rocket fuel, and then have a through space transportation system to go tap into this. Because you couldn't make it, even with that tremendous wealth, JD, you could not make the economics work if we had to bring our propellant with us out of Earth's gravity well. When a rocket launches, and you've got this 2 million pound rocket sitting on the pad, the spacecraft might only be 3, 4, 5, 6,000 pounds, like 3% of the rocket. Most of what a rocket lifts into space is its own fuel.
Wow, incredible. The idea of, and you use that, most of that just breaking through the atmosphere. Yeah, the resistance of the atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
wow.
With these two pieces together and the technology I'm working on for my very long duration upper stage, that by the way, burns liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, we could put together a transportation system through space that would allow us to move from where we are today, which is on a planet with fixed resources, where we are always concerned about the sustainability of that, really in a way seeking always to live smaller and smaller lives, to have a smaller and smaller footprint of natural resource use, ever diminishing. I mean, really project that out into the future, and it would only be a matter of time before Earth is depleted of its resources and our race stops.
Yeah, it's inevitable, right? We can only consume, resources that are non-renewable. And the idea, exactly. Yeah, the idea that Tory, that all of this is there for us to leverage if we have the innovation and the want to do it. It's remarkable. It's remarkable.
It changes the destiny of our species. We move to a post-scarcity human future.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I think about that as well as a father, and thinking about my children, thinking about my grandchildren. What's there for them, and it's wonderful to know that people like yourself, Tory, and others that you work with are looking at solving some of these issues. Who'd have thought there was giant platinum trillion, quadrillion dollar, these things floating around just on the other side of the moon. You've spoken on speeding things up, working through various technical and design challenges. I suspect some of those things are really focused on sustainability, the protections and regulations that have being put in place around this type of technology and advancement. You've been very forthright and candid about this. What lessons have been learned, and what are still to be learned, and what is working to speed up things like testing?
Sure. Well, the first lesson has always been true, and that's that, innovation is the great game changer, and no one has a monopoly on that. Good ideas come from all different places. Companies like ours that have been doing space forever and been to Mars 20 times and we know all about it, we can be innovative, but people who have never been to space can also have brilliant ideas. And so these big challenges we just talked about, it needs all of that, and it needs everyone to be contributing. So that's the first one. But since you went to testing, let me talk about that a little bit too. There's been a couple of revolutions, I'll call it, in aerospace design. And there's something we like to call digital engineering now, where there's where paper is sort of persona non grata. And we want to do as many things as we can in the digital environment where it's faster and more efficient, and we can move things along quicker. And of course, that has the benefit of things costing less to develop, but also when you go faster, you have more opportunity to iterate and refine your designs. So that's proven to be really something that is a powerful tool, and you'll see more of that. As we developed this new rocket, we not only did it digitally, but we used a different process that's called Agile, something that was originally designed in this, you probably know all about it, in the software world, and allows us to do little miniature design loops and to address our, what we like to call the systems integration, or the system V in increments. It works great on hardware too. And it does the same thing that I just talked about in digital. It lets us do a better job. And whenever you're developing a rocket, there's a deadline. And as you're moving along, there are times when good enough is good enough, and you got to move on, even though you knew you could make it higher performance or more optimized. Agile in digital engineering affords us more opportunities to be able to refine the design and make them better. But the last thing I'll touch on, I think, is that there are always still things where you must test. And while these tools make it more efficient to do the testing, and you go into the test smarter so that you don't need as many tests necessarily, and you can move through the tests more crisply because you're closer to the endpoint before you hit that hardware. One thing I will say is there are times when, testing will never go away, and there are times when you want more hardware. And so a test program should still have, adequate resources in it. You want to be hardware rich when you go into a test campaign. The definition of hardware risk is a smaller set with these wonderful tools that we have available to us, but don't get too carried away.
No, fair enough. Tory, as I'm the CEO of TMGcore. We're like you, although not space directly, we're focused on high performance computing applications. Really high performance computing. Things that are really only feed into, say, 10 or 15% of the market, where we're doing supercomputing, but focused on sustainability and all edge-based computing for decentralized distributed nodal networks to allow things like Earth to air to LEO and beyond. And one of the things that really hit home for me as we develop what we call two-phase immersion cooling systems, hardware, software, and so on, we use that digital design work, that digital engineering. We use things like Agile. To your point, it is extraordinarily valuable in accelerating our ability to innovate and develop prototypes, what I call the fail fast and pivot scenario, right? The faster you can fail, it sounds odd, but the faster you can fail and then fix and move on, the lower the costs and the faster the innovation happens.
And by the way, that powerful computing that you are giving all of us allows us to design better rockets. You'd be surprised how much the design of a rocket is actually influenced or determined by the engineering tools that are available to us at the time we design it. Your industry has been a real game changer in mine.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a symbiotic relationship for sure. And remind me to send you over an EdgeBox 30 kW version. It's a data center supercomputer on wheels that you can roll into your office and have some fun with.
Awesome.
I think who knows, maybe we'll send the next Lucy to somewhere further or get to that moon base faster, which I want a room at the first Hilton moon base. So UALA has a number of collaborations. Well, oddly enough, let's just segue into that. So you guys have a number of collaborative efforts with other organizations. I'd love to do that with TMGcore. Can you tell us a little bit about those and speak to collaboration generally in the space industry?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start with it generally. You know, the space industry is surprisingly intimate. It's actually a pretty small community, and we all know each other. And the companies that are in it, they compete with each other, they team with each other. They're in each other's supply chains just at any moment in time. Any of those roles could come to pass. And so it tends to be a relatively collegiate, sort of collaborative kind of community, because you can compete, and you can compete fiercely, but you can also partner on something the next day. And where we come together is around serving the mission of our customers. They're trying to do something important. They need us to behave in a certain way or to collaborate in a certain way to make that happen. And that's the glue that really sticks us together, because it's hard to be in this industry and not care about what these missions are, because they make a difference. They make a difference in people's lives, in our understanding of our place within the universe. It's a rare privilege. So we work with each other. We have all kinds of industry associations that are formal. We have these informal partnerships. And I've always felt that, generally when you get a strong team together and you focus on the outcome more than on your individual share of it, you get a better answer. And there'll be, space is big. There's plenty of work for everybody. We also collaborate and get involved in, things like the National Space Council. I'm a member of the Users Advisory Group to the National Space Council, and we get to all come together and set our individual sort of interests aside as businesses and try and advise the president through the vice president on what's the right thing to do to go to space and how to approach the moon and all of these other issues. And we do, and it's exciting and it's rewarding. And I'll touch last on these mega constellations I brought up a minute ago. We also call that proliferated LEO, because it's proliferated lots and lots of spacecraft in LEO. Even those of us who compete there still collaborate to make sure the common ground, the shared sort of resource of space, is available and as we said a moment ago, sustainable for all of us. So that's probably the three big categories of ways that we interact with others. And we like, when we can, to encourage that. I like to think sometimes we take a leadership role in bringing the community together and reminding them of what the bigger goal is that's important so that we can do that.
Tory, somebody has to. There has to be someone who's willing to take the lead on that and collaborate. I just, as you were talking, I started visualizing, everyone thinks of space as space, right? It's unlimited. But when you think of low orbit, there's only so much of it, believe it or not, right? And I also think of it like, when you're flying aircraft back and forth, you have air traffic control. There is a body, an organization of people that have come together and collectively have agreed that they're going to operate in a certain manner, in a certain way. One, to obviously for life safety and also for efficiencies and all of the other things that go along with that. And what I'm hearing from you is that, ULA under your tutelage is stepping forth as one of the leaders in that area, so that, when you're putting things into low Earth orbit, and for all of the national security related applications, for things associated with, watching your NFL game without interruption, and all of the other things, the myriad of other things that we don't have time to go into now, to make sure that those things aren't colliding into each other, and that you guys have that the space industry is collaborating. Is that fair to say that you guys are leading towards that leadership role?
Absolutely, JD, and that is a very insightful way to look at this. When the density or the number of spacecraft in low Earth orbit was lower, a scant 2 years ago, really all we did was we knew where everybody else was, and we made sure we went somewhere else, and that was it. That was space traffic control. Kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And today it's not like that. It's just like aircraft and airspace, where we are cohabitating now in relatively close proximity, and it requires that kind of management. And so, yes, we are stepping up to bring the community together. Everyone wants to do this because we all understand it's important, and we will do it.
That's fantastic. I've been fortunate, with TMGcore, working with, the Air Force and Space Force and the Navy and others, closely with people like Dr. Draper and others who created AFWorks and some others. This is a very special moment in time that we all collectively have an opportunity to participate. And so when I think long term, what is my legacy? What is TMGcore doing as a global citizen, as a national citizen, to proliferate, to support innovation, and working with companies like ULA, Tory? Long term, what is your long term aspiration for ULA?
Oh, great question. So, we will continue to support these really important missions for NASA and for the Space Force. But as we look into the distant future, as we look a decade out, we're going to be at the beginning of this self-sustaining cislunar economy. We'll have people on the moon. We will have prospecting first robotically, and then, with people on these asteroids. And will be on its way to a multi-trillion-dollar a year brand new economy that doesn't even exist today, a great democratization of space, where it is no longer only the domain of elite and highly trained astronauts, but a place where ordinary people go to live and work because their jobs are in space, because they can have a better life in space. Your son could be one of those people who lives and works in space. That'll be the beginning. That 10 years from now will be those first steps into that future. And we'll be a big part of that. We'll be the transportation company that's helping to make all that happen.
Well, I'm excited. You've got me excited, Tory. I've learned a lot in this discussion. Those of you who are participating, listening in, either live here now or in future, I suspect you're inspired as well. And Tory, I look forward to doing this again, and to collaborating as our companies grow and continue to support the industry. So, on behalf of all of us here at America's Future Series, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to our next conversation.
JD, it was my absolute pleasure. I had a wonderful time chatting with you, and I look forward to it as well.
To the moon and back.
To the moon and back.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
To infinity and beyond.
JD and Tory, we thank you very much. That was a great way to kick things off on this Thursday. I really enjoyed that.
And Tory is always very interesting.
He really was.
And he's funny. So,
yeah, he is funny.
He's a great leader.
He'll be appearing at the Comedy Corner this weekend. Yeah.
He's got a great sense of humor and great vision. So, really great to have someone like him to kick it off, because, kind of gives us a sense, and as JD likes to talk about, the art of the possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's go back to the moon, and
right.
Let's buy some real estate there, because I know it's appreciating.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Yeah, they were wonderful. Good way to kick it off.
Absolutely.